Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating theological idea. What if the ancient Jewish feasts aren't just holidays, but a prophetic calendar, a divine timeline of key biblical events?
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the prophecies that are believed to be already fulfilled in the spring feasts. Then, we'll take that exact same pattern and see what it might tell us about events that are still to come, all leading up to a huge climax with the Day of Atonement and the Kingdom of Tabernacles.
At the heart of all this is the idea that the 7 major biblical feasts are more than just historical remembrances. They're a prophetic roadmap. This view connects each and every feast, from Passover all the way to Tabernacles, to a specific, massive event in a divine timeline. We're talking about everything from the crucifixion to a final 1,000-year kingdom.
Okay, so what's the big idea here? How exactly do these ancient holidays connect to events in the future? How does this symbolic clock actually tick? Well, the main argument is that the feasts unfold in a very specific order for a very specific reason. The sequence is believed to be an exact mirror of major redemptive events. Think of it like a divine blueprint, right? If you can prove the pattern with things that have already happened, you can then use that same pattern to see what might be coming next.
So to really get a grip on this pattern, let's start with the spring feasts. Because in this framework, these aren't just suggestions, they're seen as prophecies that have already been fulfilled with, well, pretty incredible precision.
This whole prophetic calendar kicks off with Passover. Now, historically, this feast is all about remembering the liberation of the Israelites from Egypt, and the whole event centers on a really powerful symbol, the sacrifice of a lamb.
So, in this theological view, Passover finds its ultimate fulfillment in the crucifixion. Jesus, who is often called the Lamb of God, is seen as that final, perfect sacrifice. And people who hold this view will point to the timing, the symbolism. They say it's a perfect one-to-one match with the ancient feast.
Right after Passover, you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, in biblical symbolism, yeast, or leaven, is often a stand-in for sin. So this feast, a time when you remove all the leaven from your house, is the 7-day period that's all about purity.
And this Feast of Purity? It's believed to line up perfectly with the time that Jesus, who's viewed as sinless, was in the tomb. It's seen as a seamless continuation of the timeline, moving right from the moment of sacrifice to the period of burial.
Next up is the third spring feast, the Feast of First Fruits. And this one is all about promise. The ancient ritual wasn't about the whole harvest. It was about offering up the very first sheaf of barley. It was this tangible sign that a much bigger, much fuller harvest was just around the corner. And this is where the parallel gets, really powerful for this interpretation, the resurrection. In this view, Jesus' resurrection is that first fruit. He's the first one to rise from the dead, and that acts as the ultimate promise of that much greater harvest of believers who will one day follow.
Okay, so you see the pattern, right? With the spring feasts, we have this precise one-to-one fulfillment. So now, this framework uses that very same pattern as a key to try and unlock the meaning of the fall feasts.
And this really raises the huge question. If the spring feasts were fulfilled so perfectly, what does this prophetic calendar say is going to happen in the future? I mean, according to this view, the pattern has to continue, right?
The first of these fall feasts is the Feast of Trumpets. Historically, it's a day defined by the sound of a ram's horn, the shofar. It's this powerful, piercing sound that's meant to be a literal wake-up call for everyone.
And in this prophetic timeline, that powerful trumpet blast is seen as something way more dramatic. It's interpreted as the second coming. It's the ultimate divine announcement, signaling a radical, world-changing event.
Now we're getting to the most serious, the most complex, and really the most climactic event in this whole prophetic calendar. And this isn't just a single day. It's seen as an entire era of judgment and purification.
The Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur, is biblically the holiest day of the year. But in this prophetic framework, its fulfillment isn't some 24-hour period. No, it's interpreted as a whole sequence of absolutely world-altering events.
This framework actually breaks down the fulfillment into this dramatic 6-step process. It all kicks off with an appearance in the air, then the first resurrection, then the 7 plagues. Then it all culminates with a descent to earth, a final judgment, and finally, the imprisonment of Satan himself.
And this quote right here, it really gets to the core of it. Notice how it defines this period. It's not just one day. It's seen as one single, continuous, epic event that's bookended by two massive moments, Jesus' appearance in the clouds and the final binding of Satan.
Now, a really crucial piece of this whole interpretation hinges on this figure, Azazel. See, in the ancient Day of Atonement ritual, a scapegoat designated for Azazel would symbolically carry the sins of the entire nation out into the wilderness. Well, in this framework, that scapegoat is identified directly with Satan, who is seen as ultimately bearing the responsibility for sin and is then banished.
So after all the drama and the climactic events of the Day of Atonement, the prophetic timeline moves into its final phase. This is a brand new era of peace and resolution.
And this final era, well, it's defined by a single, very significant number, a number that represents an entire epoch of time.
And that number is 1,000. The very last feast, the Feast of Tabernacles, which historically was a celebration where people lived in temporary shelters to remember their long journey, is seen here as the prophetic blueprint for a 1,000-year kingdom on earth, a time of ultimate peace, a time when humanity finally dwells with God.
So what do we make of all this? Is time just a straight random line, or could it be a sacred prophetic calendar? This framework offers a view of history and the future not as a series of random accidents, but as a repeating symbolic cycle. And it really leaves you wondering, what does it mean to see time itself as a calendar with appointments that have already been kept and maybe, just maybe, are yet to come?